Good evening to those of you who are just coming in this evening, and welcome to week 3 of Agile Evolved, the big picture. While everybody's filing into the lecture hall as it stands, we are going to have a poll, as we always do. My name's Shane, by the way. And our lecturer, our mentor, Brenton, will be along shortly. In fact, Brenton and I are going to have a bit of a chat about something that came up in the news this week while everybody's coming in. So just, we haven't started the session so far, but here's the poll, which is about what's been the most interesting or more useful Agile concepts that we've discussed so far. So have a read of those. By the way, remember to set your chat to chatting to everybody. Say hello and tell us where you're from. In the meantime, I was going to ask Brenton, good evening, Brenton. There's been something here in Australia in the news this week, which I thought was a bit pertinent to bring up, which is about an Agile project that seems to have gone a little bit wrong. It was a very big one for the Parliamentary Expense Agency, and apparently the project, did not go very well. And it was run on an Agile basis, and the auditor who looked at it said that the Agile basis was, to some extent, the cause of those problems. What did you think about that?
Hello, Shane, and hello, everyone. Thanks for the interesting question. I thought it was actually very timely and fascinating. I did have a look at that. And we talked about this, when we talked about it yesterday, we talked about the fact that release planning is one of the very undercooked elements of the way Scrum and Agile tends to run with projects. A lot of people get stuck in their headspace if this is what happens this week or this sprint. And they don't necessarily properly look at the release plan. And we talked about the fact that the release plan is multiple sprints. It results in not features and functionality, but capability, the strategic perspective, because that's what you get paid for. That's where you get the major milestones. And it looks to me like there was a great misunderstanding between the parties about how individual features and work being done would coalesce into capability that the customer would find acceptable.
Yeah, it's amazing. There just seemed to be such a chasm between the expectations of the owners of the project, the business owners, and they expected a more or less fully featured product straight out of the blocks that would then be fine-tuned, and the Agile team, by the account of the auditor, it may not be what actually happened, was that they were presenting some functionality and depending on it to be continuously evolved, as we say.
Well, I think the point about expectations is the key point there, because from our perspective on the outside, we don't yet know who is the most right or the most wrong with their views. But you certainly can't produce an entire piece of software in the first few sprints.
You would think not. It does seem like a classic case of expectation management. And there's the article, which somebody wisely said, can we send the link through? So the link is there on the chat now. It's 7:33. We'll wait a couple more seconds and chat a bit more about this. I did see somebody from Torquay. I'm in an adjoining suburb to Torquay tonight, which is down by the coast in Victoria, for those of you who don't know Australia very well. But I can see there's people from Malaysia, London, the Czech Republic, Ghana, all over the world tonight, and that's great to see. And the AI assistant is here again as well. In fact, there's a couple of AI assistants. I'll be interested to hear. In fact, it'd be great if one of you could send your notes from this session to info@itmasters.edu.au so that we can just see what's come out of the AI transcripting process. Would be very interesting to see. I'll probably launch now, I think, into the formal part of the evening as everybody's still coming in. But again, as I said, welcome to week 3. In case you didn't realize, we were chatting about some news that we saw last week in the IT news. But this is week 3 of Agile Evolved, the big picture, a short course by IT Masters in conjunction with Charles Sturt University. As always, remember to set your chat to everyone. I've also got a couple of reminders for this week. This is the week that the survey comes out, and it'd be really great if you could fill in the survey when you get it and just let us know what's going on, because we do use the results of that survey for a number of different things. We like to check in and see what's useful, what we didn't do well. We also like to use it to judge Brenton on. So I'm sure he'll be impressed by that. But there's, they are very useful surveys to us, and we're very keen to make sure that that's what happens. Also, please, if you've got questions, remember to put them into the Q&A section, and the rest of it bung into the webinar chat. I'd like to also welcome Lily Nguyen along tonight as well, as always, to help moderate the session, and she'll keep bumping information that's pertinent into the chat as well for everybody. And I suppose now it's time to start. And again, welcome, Brenton, and good to see you, so to speak.
Thanks, Shane. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world tuning in. Thanks for joining us. I want to share this poll that we've been going. Can we do that, Shane? Can I share that with everyone?
Yep, I've ended it and shared it.
All right. So a couple of things. Let's just talk about the numbers that are there so far. The winner out of this is the collaborative and distributed decision-making. The change, perhaps, the difference in the empowerment of people making decisions, who gets to make them, who gets involved in them, and how that works, appears to be the biggest thing that people have found interesting or useful. But regarding our previous discussion about the case study that we just talked about in the news recently, 20%? No, 19. We've dropped down to 19. Release planning of multiple iterations is still a strong contender in there. I mean, they're actually pretty balanced, to be honest. I'm a little bit surprised and interested in how balanced they are, more than I expected. But that release planning, that 19%, is bang on what I think is, in my experience, the single biggest challenge, weakness, problem with the success of Agile projects overall. So
interesting.
So,
and particularly in the light of that stuff, and I'm sure there'll be more news as we go along each week.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see what if there's been any developments next week. We'll catch up with then. But tonight we're going to talk about Agile delivery. We're going to talk about ongoing things, and we're trying to draw some distinctions between some of the ideas that we've covered already and how they might be a little different, and what might be added to what we need to think about for Agile delivery. We'll start, of course, with some basic concepts. This is our poll. We've done this, had this bit. Let's refresh on the course syllabus. This is everything that we're looking at. Here is where we're up to. So we've already done the core Agile philosophies. We've already done projects. We're now talking about Agile delivery. And of course, we're yet to cover next week about hybrid and large-scale Agile. So hold your thoughts on that bit until we get there. So today, we're going to talk about value streams. This is our setting the scene, the core concepts behind what is a value stream and how is it different from projects. We will talk a bit about some popular methodologies that are Agile methodologies that are used or have evolved for ongoing events. In a similar way, the Scrum has been developed for start and stop projects. Different methodologies are involved with things that are continuing. We'll talk about CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery. We'll go through that in the idea of flow. We'll start to use some of these core concepts that we've covered in the early stages and put them into a practical format when we start to talk about that. We will touch on a little bit of DevOps as well when we do that, but we won't go too deeply into DevOps because we have an entire short course of 4 weeks that goes through that in much more detail for anyone who's interested to go in and check that out. And we'll talk about something that's kind of interesting and is, in my view, one of the most significant and most difficult. I talked last week that release planning was the big bugbear that I find is the tough thing to get people's head around. And in delivery, to me, it's contiguous knowledge. So we're going to explore what that is and what that means as we go through it. Now, I'm going to go back to a diagram that we looked at last week. And a few people commented on this diagram, and I'm going to evolve it a little bit. It's the iteration model, but we're dealing with something where there's existing value. Now, in this model, we had the envision. We're now calling it an opportunity because something's already there. It's not just envisioned. It exists. It can be described and defined. What we're looking at is an opportunity to improve, to add, to expand on it. So that's the starting point. That's the ideation. Then we look at things that are going to be familiar, the speculate, the explore. And here's where things get a little bit different. This third step, I'm calling the validate step. Now, at the end, you have delivery, which is what we previously said was, closing a project. But here you're simply delivering that which you have speculated, explored, and adapted. And yes, speculate is still planning in Agile, and exploration is still creation. And over here, the validation is where we have feedback and testing. And the testing part is the thing that is the new horse in the race. It's the new thing that we have to embrace, embody, and integrate into what we do in an Agile basis when we're dealing with something that already exists. And we think about testing, there's a variety of perspectives we can bring to it. We're going to try and nail that down a little bit, or at least draw out some of the most important attributes of what testing in this situation would look like and how it leads to validation. And what are the rules around that? Because as we found when we talked about Scrum, and even before that with our philosophies and concepts, there are rules in Agile. And some of them are very important. And occasionally, some of them are sacred. And we're going to have one or two of those tonight that we'll talk about. Now, firstly, value streams. Let's get some terminology cleared out. When we talk about value streams, we're talking about, as the word suggests, a stream, an ongoing flow of value. And it often happens to projects where something goes through a project process like Scrum or something similar, and it gets created, but then it becomes a value stream. So you think about, you reach a point, draw a line under it and say, okay, we're out of the project phase. We're using it. It's live out there in the wild, but we're not done with that. We want to still add more. We've got more budget. We've got more opportunities. We've got more time. It's just going to keep going. So we have a process that continues to add effort. And we might still have investment in resources that still create things. But it might be a lot less because most of the heavy lifting of creating it has been done. And now we're only adding little bits. So we might have more specialized expertise or a more narrow range of expertise that's still involved in creating the last bits and pieces. But it might not be the last. It might just go on and on and on. It might be something that we're forever looking to improve. But we're doing it using Agile principles, which means we're trying to be efficient about it. And we're going to define what efficiency means to Agile when we look at some of these methodologies in a moment. We're also going to define what they mean by holistic and how that looks in a real practical sense. But it's about taking everything into account. So a value stream does not exist in a bubble. Unlike a project which might. A project could be self-contained. It can be a bubble environment that doesn't necessarily have as much interaction with the business as usual. But a value stream typically is the business as usual. So the barriers get torn down. And when you start to say, okay, I can see there's a connectivity between the ongoing creation of new and the delivery of the existing, yeah, they kind of bump into each other. It's a lot more than that. And we as the people involved need to go a step beyond and say, no, we're aggressively tearing down barriers because those barriers will appear subconsciously if we don't. So a few attributes of value streams, they are still incremental, just like everything else we looked at with Agile, with Scrum, with everything. It's adding value in small portions, sometimes very small portions, tiny little things. I jokingly gave the example of continuous improvement recently where I said, hey, how about someone just move a tick box from here to here? That could be how small it is. So the increment, the size of the increment doesn't matter. What matters is that it's small enough to be managed in a variety of ways because everything is condensed. Now, we talked about sprints in Scrum, and we suggested that sprints are often 1, 2, 3 weeks in duration. In value streams, they are often a lot shorter. And everything still needs to happen. You still need to have the ding, great idea. Okay, what does this mean? Describe it, define it. figure out what does it mean, what are the implications, what is it going to impact, what's that going to look like, how are we going to build that, who's going to build that, get it built, is it working, is it right, is it what we need? All of that happens in a much shorter time frame and in every iteration. It's endless. A value stream, like by definition, does not have a prescribed end date. Well, other than the fact that if the service has an end date that might naturally exist, well, then presumably the value stream would. But it doesn't need to have, by definition, an end date. It typically doesn't. It stops whenever we decide we're no longer willing to invest in that. They're collaborative, just like any agile project is. Stakeholders work together, and we're going to elaborate on what that looks like in a little more detail when we start to talk about methods. But it's careful about a few things. Careful about things in ways that a Scrum project may not need to be. In a Scrum project, unless, as per the news example we just talked about, unless you have customers that are itching to use it as soon as possible, you've often got a lot more freedom about when capability is going to be available, when people are going to start enjoying it. Well, they're enjoying it right now in a value stream, and we don't want to damage that. So there's a different requirement for testing that we'll talk about. But it's also opportunistic. It's very much a case of value streams don't begin with the idea of we know what's wrong and we're going to fix it all. Here's our gap analysis. That might be a starting point. But every time we do something in a value stream, some new opportunity will come up that will find something new to do, some new idea, some new suggestion from somebody. And that's one of the reasons why value streams are endless, because the ideas of what a thing could be are theoretically endless. So we don't necessarily want to block them off. So here's a summary point. Agile delivery, simple description we can give is that we use tight cycles of effort, which we're familiar with. We've talked about the iteration things, and even tighter collaboration, where I mentioned, for example, aggressively tearing down barriers in ways that you might not need to do in a Scrum environment, but you do here, to continually deliver small validated enhancements. Small because that's what lets us validate them. Enhancement to existing services, existing anything. So that's our simple takeaway line. Let's look at a couple of methodologies that are built to and operate on ongoing basis. Now, we're not going to go deeply into these. I'm just drawing out the attributes, the key elements or philosophies from these that will help paint the picture of what we're talking about with agile delivery. And one of them is Kanban. Kanban is all about a handful of things, and it begins with the biggest of them, which is flow. So in the Kanban philosophy, it's all about just in time. You do things just when they need to be done, and you only have available or are leveraging just what you need right when you need it. It's not about you have everything just in case. It's not about breadth. It's about narrow and specific. Flow is about you take something on, you have everything you need and just that, and then you handle that. It's about being limited. What that means is that you limit the amount of work in progress. You don't have this huge backlog over everyone's head. You don't have a lot of things that are getting done early. Let's just do 50 of these, and then we'll put them over in this bucket, and they'll eventually get used up and done. Right? That is not what Kanban is all about. Kanban is more about, okay, this person over here, they need 5. We're going to do 5, and they'll have 5 right now. Because doing 10 would be an extra 5. That'd be a waste of our time, because whatever we build in excess, it's going to be idle. So it means that work is pulled when capacity is available, when the team members have the capacity, the time, the ability to do something, which means when they've finished the previous thing. So the idea of pulling based on capacity brings the concept of completion. I'm going to complete this until it's complete, not until the sprint is over. That's not my pressure point. Working is my pressure point. Done, finished, validated. That's my end point. And at that point, I will then put my brain into the next thing. Until then, anything else is a distraction, which may cause me to make an error, and deliver something that isn't valid, isn't working, isn't successful. So we touched on this in the first week. The ability or the need to reduce cognitive load is part of this equation. And like all agile philosophies, it's about how do we do this better? We talked about the sprint retrospective, different from the review, right? The sprint review is where you sit down with the customer and look at the work that's been done. The retrospective is where we talk about how did we go about it as a team? And Kanban has that. All agile principles, all agile methods have an element of that in them. But lastly, on another point, and this is going to come back and get mentioned again later as well, and that is visibility. Everyone can see everything. The entirety of something moving through a workspace, the entire workflow, everything and where it is, where it's at, where it's going next, everyone can see that. Total visibility. And there's some psychological reasoning behind that, because everyone needs to have the opportunity to be aware and be able to contribute their unique piece of knowledge, which might be to say, hey, this thing is over here and it's going to have a problem when it gets to here because this isn't done and this isn't ready. And you don't have this as a requirement in there. So this is going to have to be done differently. They're able to contribute those pieces of knowledge because of the visibility. People don't get caught out by having something arrive in their inbox or on their task list or in their ticket queue that they had no idea was coming. And like, really? You want me to do this now, today? We're not going to be able to have a very fast-paced, very just-in-time process unless we have enough planning about it to be able to say, okay, that's coming tomorrow, so I need to get these things happening today. So it's all about the flow. Let's compare that to something actually a little bit older. The original, Lean, originally referred to as the Toyota way back in the 1980s, where it was originally developed as part of the Toyota in manufacturing. And of course, there's few things more endless than a production line and a factory. This is where Lean originated, but it has similar philosophies. It's still incremental. It says you start where you are and you change one thing at a time. In a factory, you've got lots of things that probably could be improved in the beginning in a production line. And the philosophy was we change one thing and we finish changing it. Then we change the next thing. It's a big focus on no wastage. The difference between lead time, process time, keeping costs down, keeping risks down. Lead time is the amount of time between where something is requested or required and when it's actually delivered. Processing time is the amount of work hours needed to produce that. Now, we as a society are very used to these two things being very different. And we are very accustomed to that. You place an order with some organization for something that's going to take somebody 20 minutes to do. How many days do you think you might have to wait to get that 20 minutes worth of work done? Extrapolate that into millions of examples everywhere. That is the very thing that Lean was trying to tackle as a starting point. How can we reduce that? Why? Because things were happening during the several days that you're waiting that had nothing to do with your delivery of your order or meeting the request. What if you could make a request for something to be improved and it could get improved tomorrow or in an hour? This was the kind of question that Lean was asking itself. And of course, it had the need for information. Everyone had to know, had to have access. Even the people that were working on the factory floor, in some cases, especially the people that were working on the factory floor, had to have an understanding, because what they realized is that when person A understood what person B was doing with their output, they suddenly realized that they could do it a little bit better and a little differently to make person B's job easier. You multiply that times 1,000. And that's how the factory line evolved during those decades. So things that are idle are considered wasted. They're not being leveraged. They're not being utilized. This was the Lean idea. Now, we're going to pull from all of these, and we have been pulling from all of these. And all of these ideas lead together to help us use agile delivery from all of this. So to bring it all together, to summarize, we're doing things in small pieces. However big, however that looks, we still have flexibility over how long and how much, but we're only taking on small pieces of work. We're also sharing information. The work we're taking on isn't secret. It's public. It's publicly known. It's publicly shared. Sometimes it's pushed. The simple fact that we know that there are people out there amongst our team or other teams who would benefit from this knowledge is something we should embrace. And therefore, it's easier for us to make the decision and have the question, who else needs to know about this? That person C needs to know about this because that's going to impact them. That gives person C, D, E, and F all the way to Z an opportunity to have an input. There is open input. Everyone has a chance to have their say. Now, this doesn't mean that you end up with enormous arguments and discussions. It is meant to be useful. It's meant to be effective. It's meant to be validated input. It's not meant to be a committee meeting where you say, well, I'm going to invite everyone every time there's a decision just in case they have something to say. Once teams get into a rhythm, they get to know who does what and who's responsible for what and who are the custodians of information, not owners, custodians, because they're meant to be able to share it. You get quick decisions. You do a thing at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and you talk to person B, person C, because person B is going to be supporting it when it goes live, and person C is going to be using it. And by 10:30, you've gotten that information, and a decision's been made as to whether or not you should go left or right. And by 12 o'clock, you've done that. You've gone left or right. By 3 o'clock, you've had the testing done, and by 4 p.m., it can be in the queue ready to go out and launch tomorrow. This is the idea. That means we have to test things pretty quickly. That means it has to be excruciatingly small as a change. You put 15 things into a change, think of the possible combinations of interaction between 15 things. I mean, there's a logarithmic answer to that question. It's a big number. Many different permutations can come out of the various combinations of many things. We want to limit that. We're going to put a few things in, and each person is only responsible for one thing at a time. I'm going to move this tick box from here to here. That is my job right now, right here, right now. I might do something else in a couple of hours because this will be quick and easy. But I'm going to test this tick box to death before I say it's done. Now, is this hard? Here's a question for you all. This is a poll. Shane, could you throw that out there for us and see what people think? Which of some of these things we talked about are hard for folks? This is your organization, your opinion, your perspective. And it's only a single choice, folks. So if it's all hard, you've got to pick your favorite. Now, we'll talk about this poll when it's done, but we'll also have a bit of a check with any questions that are in the questions box at that point. We haven't gone deep into things yet, but we have some questions, Shane.
Yeah, we've got a couple of Kanban questions. First one, how are the impediments managed in the Kanban flow if work in progress is limited? I assume that's what WIP means.
Yeah, so yes, I would assume as well that if work in progress is limited, in fact, some of the reasons why it's limited is so that you find the impediments that are specifically relevant to the piece of work that you're in right now. You're looking for the repercussions. You're looking for the obstacles only as they relate to the work that's in motion at the moment. What Kanban wants us to avoid is solving problems that don't matter right now, dealing with impediments that aren't contextually relevant in the here and now. Now, that's not to say that if you see something splashed all over the floor, you go and get a mop before someone slips on it. Yes, there's a degree of that, of course. But the philosophy is you deal with the impediments that matter right now or immediately in front of you. That's the idea. And that is exactly part of why work in progress is kept to a limit, because if we had 15 things in our work in progress, we'd have many different rabbit warrens we could potentially go down looking for and dealing with impediments that may or may not actually manifest or become significant at the time.
What types of projects are best suited for the Kanban?
Well, Kanban is often used for things like service delivery. I mean, a classic example would be the help desk and operations that involve support and maintenance of things. Maintenance is the sort of thing that could work with Kanban because it's continuous, it's ongoing. It's anything with a constant inward stream of requirements, expectations, or opportunities requiring an outward continuous stream of work being done. And that's what most maintenance activities are, whether they're maintaining services or anything at all. It's meant for that sort of thing. Well, when I say it's meant for, that's where it's often used. It's different from lean because lean is usually used for the things like the creation on a factory basis. More common.
That both of them need a very sophisticated ecosystem around them as well. Like you can't.
They do. They are evolved.
Yeah.
It took Toyota quite a few years to perfect, or even wouldn't call it perfect, but to mature their methodology and their philosophy and to make it work. I mean, they would have had probably the highest level of obstacle in mindset back then.
Here's an interesting one. Not that the others weren't, by the way. Question fast testing. What if the organization is still going through an ITIL change management process where the CAB or the CAB is on a Wednesday and there are multiple approval processes? Is this saying we get as far as we can before going through the CAB? I find that often changes are delayed purely as we need to go through a long process where CABs are only weekly and the approvals before the CAB are time consuming.
A simple answer to the question that's been posed is that the CAB, which is the change authority board, the process where the change is approved, that happens daily. If that's how often you want to make the decision to roll out, then that's how often you make that decision. If you're only having a CAB once a week, then that's how often you can roll out. And if you're wanting to roll out faster than that, you need to CAB more often. There has to be an alignment between them. And if that means your CAB has to get an awful lot more lean with fewer people and only this person and that person because what's on the agenda today only needs their expertise and it's only going to be a 10-minute discussion, and that's what our CAB is today, that's what it is. It's breaking down some of those norms that we're kind of familiar with and say, well, what is a CAB? You know, what's a CAB meeting? What's a change approval meeting look like? It's going to look very different under a continuous delivery model.
Right. Some of these questions are quite long. By the way, there was a bit of consternation at the idea of daily meetings, daily reviews on that. Review versus retro. Sorry.
There's always consternation about daily anything.
I think it was more like getting everybody to sign up to it. Review versus retro. Can the retro discussion include the customer, or is it really only the delivery team?
It's really meant for the delivery team because it's meant to be the place where you can say things you don't want the customer to hear. It's meant to be a little bit more free and expressive in that way. It's where you can be honest and say, we messed up here. This was a mistake. This wasn't good. This wasn't cool, right? And we need to have the safe space to be able to do that without a customer. Now, we might, at the end of the review, ask the customer, hey, you got any feedback on how we're working together here? Let us get your feedback, and then we'll take that into our retrospective meeting after lunch where we'll have a honest exchange of views. That can happen, but you wouldn't normally have your customer there in person.
Right. Do you want to review the poll now?
Yeah, I'm going to share it and see what people have had to say. So hardest things, well, there's two strong winners here. Tight collaboration between stakeholders. Humans will be humans. We'll go over that in a little more detail over the next 10 minutes or so. And the human challenges that we have are definitely part of why this is hard. And avoiding extraneous, unvalidated effort that often yields no value. So this is the classic tug of war between, yeah, but you said adaptation is good, right? You told me that I could come up with new ideas and that would be good. And you'd take that and you do that. Well, yes, but when we're bringing down our workflow into the smallest of increments, what we're doing right now has absolute paramount importance. So you don't come along to a team and say, hey, whatever you're doing is not as important as my new great idea. That's forbidden. Whatever they're doing right now, gets done to the best of their ability and as thoroughly as it can and needs to be. And then they say, well, I'm ready for new things, next thing, bring me your great idea. And then there's an opening for the great idea. So, and that's a difficult philosophy, because what people are used to is the funnel, right? The funnel philosophy. Just chuck everything in the top of the funnel, fill the funnel up with all these great ideas. Even Scrum has this. It's called the product backlog. You pile everything in. But then people say, well, hang on, how come you haven't got to mine now yet? I've been waiting so long for you to look at my thing. So the funnel mentality is a little different, or has to be modified to preserve the fact that what's getting done right now, nothing is more important than that. Unless you're happy for that to be made a mistake and ruin what's currently being delivered live, then we can muck about with things. But of course, no one's going to admit to that. Any other big questions we've got, Shane, before we go to the next section?
There's a very big question, but I'm going to break it down and just give you the last section of it. This is from Jessica, who's new to project management, and they're working as a program project coordinator. Just skipping to the thing, they have a number of enhancements which have been put on backlog until post go live. Does the methodology apply to assist with the delivery of these enhancements?
So if you're in an Agile or Scrum project and things get postponed until after things go live, that is really common. And actually it echoes, or the reasons echo what I just said. What you're working on right now is always the most important thing in the world. And when you have things, and this is about release planning as well, right? If you have a bunch of features that have said, okay, getting the entire capability that we need usable by the body of users that need it, getting that box ticked, that done, that's more important than these extra features that are nice to haves. And we're familiar with the nice to have concept. So that approach is actually really common. And it's one of the reasons why Scrum projects often turn into value streams. Because once you get to that point of saying, all right, we've finally got the skeleton out there. It's doing enough to get people using what's there, but there's still this backlog of things to be added on that's after the go live. Well, now we're effectively in a value stream agile delivery scenario, because now we've got something we can't afford to break, but we still want to add things to it. Until it goes live, you can break things far more easily with far fewer repercussions, as long as you fix it. But you could fix it soon. In an ongoing delivery, there is no, okay, we can fix. No, we just don't break it. That's your starting point. And if you've broken it, you fix that before anything else. That is the most important thing in the world right now.
Interesting to see also that Adam has made a really interesting comment in the chat that I encourage you to have a look at, which is about Toyota and how they got around multiple suppliers and what they required their suppliers to do.
It's a fascinating story. Yes, go ahead.
Can ITIL and Agile work together to deliver value, especially when ITIL requires far more documentation and time spent on recording information?
I don't think there's a clear opposition between them. I do think they can. You do need to adapt ITIL a little bit, but if you look at ITIL 4 rather than ITIL 3, you find that ITIL 4 starts to give you philosophies. It starts to give you concepts. It starts to give you something to fall back on and still be ITIL, even when some of the specifics. So you look at ITIL 4, you get those fundamental ideas, you get the terminology, and you get some points of interconnect between things, which is the service value chain that says this connects to here. And that's kind of all you need from ITIL as a framework. But then after that, there's a lot more picking and choosing you can do, and you can bring in agile delivery to play around with that. And look, I strongly suspect that ITIL 5 will go even further in that direction whenever they do it, and be far more capable of agile delivery and value stream delivery than they are right now. But ITIL 4 was the first time they moved away from scripted activities, which was what they had in 3.
Right.
Did I share? I haven't shared. Did I share the results? Did you guys see the results shared? You did.
I've
All
just
right.
turned
So I
them
got
off while we were talking.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. All right. So let's talk a bit about the next point to cover. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, CI/CD. And again, I did indicate we will touch on DevOps a little bit, but not in great detail because we have a lot more information elsewhere that does a far more detailed job of that. Let's talk about what we mean here. What is continuous integration, continuous delivery? It's the idea that we can build something and then deliver it in incredibly short timeframes. And by incredibly short, I mean daily. I don't know what it is right now, but the last time I looked at it and read about it, Facebook do 2 code pushes per day. So twice a day, they release code onto their live production systems. Now, it's more complicated than that because they have a multitude of live systems. But they are an example of an organization that is able to push things out so fast that they're doing it twice a day. Now, that doesn't mean that the same person does one thing in the morning and one thing in the afternoon. Obviously, they have different teams working on different cycles and rhythms because it's enormous. But yes, you can have things that are done and cycles that occur on a daily basis. That can certainly happen. It might not be what organizations do, but that is what CI/CD is trying to make possible, is trying to make that effective. And we're going to delve into some of the reasons why and how we might pick and choose some of that for ourselves. So DevOps is an example of this. DevOps has a lot more to say about it, and DevOps is very clearly software delivery. And when we talk about how this works, we are going to be talking about software from the point of view of being the most common use, but you could use these in other ways in other areas. A simple breakdown of what CI/CD is, right? Continuous integration is the philosophy that practices that are done, things that are done, work that is done, decisions that are made, actions that are taken during the development of something that help ensure that what we do is going to integrate perfectly later. What it says is that you think about and solve everything that needs to be solved regarding the integration of some new feature whilst you build it. It is not a separate process. It's not something that you say, well, I've done my 17 lines, stick it in the box, make it play nice with everything else. No, it's like whilst I'm building it, my role is to figure out proactively every bit of information I need to be able to make sure that it is integrated the moment I say it's done. That's what continuous integration says. Continuous delivery are all the things that we do after that development is done to actually successfully deploy it. Because as much as we'd love that to have been perfect the first time, there's always going to be extra things that need to be thought about. There's going to be some extra caution to be taken. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And again, DevOps goes through more detail about that. So that's what CI/CD means. It's those 2 areas that are a little different. We think differently about these things. We're not separating things anywhere near as much. In fact, the whole idea of agile delivery is that stuff gets smushed together. Conversations, people, decisions, activities, all gets smushed together and deal with under a single context that is the successful delivery of a new feature or function. And everything that needs to work harmoniously together to make that happen, better happen. So let's look at the key areas of DevOps. We've looked at Kanban, we looked at Lean, a few points to think about out of DevOps. And this isn't all of DevOps. But DevOps does smush everything together. It's in the name, right? Development and operations. One word, one thing. Well, it's still 2 things, but it's tight. It's carefully woven together. It's contiguous. It's adjacent. So this means that you have coders that are coding and testers that are testing and support staff that are sitting there and doing at it, looking at it on the same day. Users that are looking at it on the same day or in the same time window. all connected to each other, so adjacent that it doesn't in any way feel separate. This means you need tremendous alignment. This is where DevOps tells us to aggressively break down the barriers. There is no us and them. There is no your job and my job. There is our job. There is your part of our job and my part of our job, but it's our job. And our job is to keep the good running without it breaking and add more good to that as and when we can. That is our job. And it's meant to not just blur the boundary between support and maintenance, crew and activity and work and thinking and the development and delivery of new. It's meant to make it harmonious and synergistic. And yes, as soon as we start to say that, people are going to say, yeah, but people think differently, right? The people that maintain stuff and support stuff, they're just a different beast to the people that are creatively coming up with new cool things, right? Yes, there are mental benefits to people that think a certain way. But a lot of that is not necessarily personality. A lot of it is habits. A lot of it is comfort zone. When we make it their responsibility to at least look over the fence, see what's there and know how that works, because that's meant to matter to them, we often find that people are much more capable of that than we thought. We might not make them do the other job. That's not what we're trying to do. We want people doing their expertise, but in a way that allows them to contextually do it with a bigger picture. Things get automated in DevOps. It's big on automation. And that's because when DevOps talks about software development, there are a bunch of technical tasks that could be automated. And one of my favorites to talk about is the idea of test environments, development environments, right? We're going to talk about environments in a moment. I'm going to break it down a bit further. But the idea that there's some restriction over developers being able to just take a copy of the production environment, have a copy of it. Under DevOps, they should be able to do that via an automated process almost at will. And that environment, that test environment that they've created needs to be as accurate as possible reflection of what is actually real and live so that they get the most accurately possible feedback from their testing when they say, what if I tweak this? What if I change this little setting? Oh, wow, big things happen, right? So they need to know that. Not in a 6-week-old thing that they got because they had a lengthy approval process to go through, and it was an overnight thing that the machine had to do, and someone had to intervene and make it happen manually. And then they finally got their now out-of-date copy of the environment that they're going to expect it to code into. No, absolutely not. And testing of user functionality. Yeah, you can get a bunch of people sitting in front of screens clicking away, but we can script and simulate a lot of that. And yes, some of those are expensive and hard to do and not always available. But DevOps says the more we can automate those things, they are an investment. They're an investment in productivity, and they're an investment in risk management. We should do them. DevOps is a bit relaxed because of this, because it says, hey, developers, you should have all the tools you need. You should have all the environment, the testing, the development tools. You should have a relaxed environment in which to be able to do the creative stuff that you're doing. But it's also strict that says that thou shalt not mess with or even lower the standards or expectations of the production environment. There's something called in DevOps called the green environment. And the green environment is the working, validated, tested, ready to go live environment that's just been worked on. It's had some changes made to it. It's had some things added. And that has been as carefully prepared as possible for that to go live at any moment. And I literally mean at any moment. So when people are putting their bits of code and their changes and it's all been tested and then it goes into the green environment, that means the green could go blue in 10 minutes from now. Now, obviously, if we're running that sort of environment, we can roll back because what we just put out now becomes the new green environment. We can go backwards if we need to. But it's strict because we just don't mess with what's about and ready to go live. But DevOps recognizes the value of separate skill sets between development and operations, but makes it a collaborative effort. Now, I want to elaborate a little bit for a moment on some of what makes this safe. Well, what is Agile delivery and things like DevOps in particular doing to make things safer? Because we often get a little bit worried when we're saying, hang on, Brenton, you're saying that we're going to be making changes almost every day. Well, maybe not for you. Maybe every 2 days or 3 days will make more sense. But how do we keep all that safe regardless of how fast it is? Here's a few fundamental ideas to think about. Contiguous testing means that whatever we just did is what we're now testing. We're not testing something that we may have half forgotten because we did it a week ago. Can't happen. Should never happen. You don't start working on the next thing until you've finished testing the old. Now, you might say, hang on, Brenton, I don't want my developers to be testers. That's a different job function. It's a different pay scale. I want different people doing that. Okay. Maybe they sit next to each other. Maybe they don't sit next to each other, but maybe they're in constant contact. Maybe they're able to talk about something minute by minute, hour by hour as the testing is done. And as soon as the tester says, bing, something happening. What's the old-fashioned method? Okay, I'm going to log a report. This happened. This occurred. And this is why it happened. And I'm going to spend my time as a tester recording the bug? No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ping the developer on his instant messaging system, wait a couple of minutes for him to notice that. He's going to say, yep, what you got. I'm going to hit screen sharing, and that person is going to see my bug in real time right now. And then they're going to say, oh, I know where that code is. Hang on a sec. And then they're going to fix it. Now, that's a scenario. That's a story. It's not always going to play out like that. But that's what we're aiming for. Think of how much more efficient that would be. Think of how much more dangerous that would be if the developer was already 3 products ahead of that and had to go backwards too far to figure that out. The green state, I've already mentioned this, it's sacred. All right, what goes into the green, which is ready for production, could go live at any second, the push environment, it's got to be validated. It's got to be so finished that we're ready for it to be used by whoever. Now, yes, there's even more processes and methods. And if you're interested in how you can do things in different testing and different releasing, go look at the DevOps short course. It gives a lot more information about that. Another thing that gives us safety is visibility, full visibility. I'm a developer working on something and I'm thinking, okay, that's interacting with that thing over there. I need to be able to know right now whether or not who's working with that, who's working on it, who uses it, who supports it, who has an interest in it, who's responsible for it. I need to be able to see any of that and therefore communicate about it if I need to. Support people that are saying, oh, I'm looking at something that seems to be a problem here. I need visibility to see, is there a fix to this in the works? Is something being worked on it? Was something worked on this yesterday? That might be the reason for why this behavior I'm seeing now. As a support person, might need to be able to do that. Full visibility. These are some of the things that keep us safe. My favorite phrase in this regard, if it didn't pass, don't push. That is, if it didn't pass the tests, don't push it out. So let's look at this flow in action, right, in some sequence. First, the ideas and the possibilities. We've got an existing service. It's out there. It's running. It's doing great things. And there's some possibilities. There's some ideas. It could be a little bit better. There's some ideation going on. Different stakeholders. It could be a support person that says, well, if you did this, this would be better and this would be easier and I'd get fewer of these complaints. Or the user saying this would be nice to have, or wherever it comes from. There's the germ of an idea. That gets broken down into a small, manageable parcel of work that someone who builds this sort of stuff pulls into their workload and says, oh, I'll do this. I'll do this piece of it. Small enough to be tested and verified, validated as being suitable. That work gets done. And it gets tested as soon as it's done. It gets tested whilst it's being done. And it gets continued to be done until it passes all of its testing. It gets feedback straight away. It gets put out to the users to work in the test environment if possible, to try that, the beta testing. Or if it goes out in a push, before we say, right, I'm going to work on this next exciting thing. No, actually, I pushed something out yesterday. I might check in with a couple of users to see if that's working the way they intended. Then, testing environment must be accurate. How many times have we seen situations where something was tested in an out-of-date testing environment? No excuse for that. Not in a DevOps environment, not in an Agile environment. No, it's absolutely no excuse for that sort of thing occurring. It's a fundamental flaw that's going to cause problems that don't need to be there. It's going to be wastage according to Lean. It's going to be wastage according to Kanban and Flow. So then when they are tested and done and ready, they get put into a green deployment queue, which may not push every day or twice a day, even if you're like Facebook. It could go once a week. That could be how fast you push things out. You get to choose that. But whatever goes into that push environment, sacred, working as perfectly as you can make it. And that goes out there regularly and can roll back if needed. So that's the flow of Agile delivery, Agile enhancement, Agile improvement, Agile development. And yes, it can all happen in one day. But look, if one day isn't your speed, don't stress about that. I'm just highlighting that because I know for a lot of people, that sounds a little extreme. And if you move a little closer and a little faster and a little tighter and a little smaller, that might be enough for you. Let's look at the environments. I hinted at this a little while ago. We'll talk about some of the environments. I want to lay them out. There's the build environments that exist typically discreetly, often on people's desktops or laptops or wherever. These are often individual. These are often things that exist in and get broken and damaged and tossed out and deleted on a regular basis. This is where stuff is experimented in and build stuff that gets created. And these can sometimes be out of date. There's test environments that cannot be out of date because their goal is to see if the code or the thing that we're doing or the environment that we've built is going to work in the closest facsimile or the closest simulation that we can give you as to what's really live out there. Because as we know, and we've all seen it happen, right? Something that didn't get tested because it wasn't present or visible or wasn't that way in the test environment, but it is in the production environment. And oh, goodness me, it's a problem. The green environment, that's not where you test stuff. That's where it's been tested and it's ready to go live at any moment. And so it's not for fast and loose changes. It's settled, it's safe, and it's ready to go. And then there's the live environment that we don't do anything to. We don't change it. We don't. I mean, okay, there are situations where hot fixes occur, but even a hot fix is nothing more than an out of schedule green push, because it's still going to come from the green environment. It's going to be hot fixed into green first, tested in green, and then maybe pushed out as an interim push. That's all a hot fix needs to be. Doesn't need to skip any of these processes. It just happens by skipping timeframes, skipping procedure. Gets ahead of the queue. So a final point before we wrap up and then have a few questions. I want to talk about contiguous knowledge, because this to me is one of the most significant and most challenging aspects of making Agile delivery work. It's a key attribute of DevOps. It's a key attribute of Kanban and Lean. Contiguous knowledge is the awareness that teams must know what information exists. A development team must know what exists, what information exists in the support team, the maintenance team, or the user environment. They have to know what's there so they know what to look for and what to ask for when they call upon it. And when they do, that has to be available. Any information has to be available just in time to help, not like lodge a request, set up a meeting, ask for something, automate as much of it as we can. And I think it's fair to say that, and probably many of you have already encountered this, that local instances, business AI, or LLMs running in a business context are going to make this a lot easier. They already are. And making sure it's valid. making sure information is useful, up to date, accurate, version control. AI is going to help us with that too. Now, here's the great test. And this is where it starts to get a little bit contentious. When I say starts to, it's very contentious already for some in some environments. But here's where it becomes super tricky. The test for whether or not knowledge is contiguous is when it is one single action away from being used. Imagine that. One single action. Knowing where it is, what it is, how to get it. One single action. That's not one click. It's one action. I'm going to go here, open this, look in here, and find it. I've found it. That is hard. But that's what it takes. The more we can get this, and this is the pie in the sky, holy grail stuff. This is where, you know, we've reached the nirvana of agile delivery, and when we're able to do this reliably. This is the tough part, making this successful. That's the piece that's missing. When I talked before about those fanciful ideas of saying, yeah, developer is doing this and they've got one-to-one communication in real time with the tester as the bugs are appearing in front of them. And that information is one step away from the developer. Not tester finds it, records it, logs it. That's 3 steps before it gets back to the coder. 1 step. A lot of interactions have to happen to make this work. And what's the whole point behind that amount of interaction? It's the lack of failure. It's the success rate. It's reducing the errors. It means that everything works smoothly. And why do we need to go to so much trouble and have so much interaction and break down all these barriers and have a sharing of information in order to make things that much better? Because we don't have time for major corrective steps. We want to get the next feature out there. Because if we're not great at this, our competitors might be. This is doable. This is possible, no matter how fanciful it may seem. And if it's possible, someone will figure out how to do it. And if we're not doing it, someone else might already be. And they may be delivering their features and their whatever faster than we can. So here's a summary to help us wrap up. And then I've got a final poll. Agile delivery relies on these key concepts. Everyone has a stake in the output and its quality. It's a shared responsibility. We keep things small enough that we can test it thoroughly. That's the primary reason behind biting small. We keep the turnarounds for everything tight. Things don't sit and wait. We make fast decisions and everyone has visibility to all of that. We don't tolerate barriers. We don't tolerate obstacles between people, between ideas, between concepts. Communication must be open, free, and fluid. We use automation, especially on technical tasks, as much as we can afford, because we have to invest in that. But there's typically very good returns on those investments. We treat the green environment, the push environment, or the pre-push, the thing that could become the live production environment at any moment, we keep that sacred. And we pursue all of the benefits of contiguous knowledge, because contiguous knowledge is what makes all of the things above that line possible. 1 step away. Here's our final opinion poll. And then we'll tackle our questions and any new ones that come up along the way. How well does your organization live up to the idea? Sorry, Shane, you go ahead.
No, that's great. So while people are punching in answers to that, can the development team support DevOps activity? Most of the organizations ideally might have a dedicated DevOps team. I would imagine that's a function of size, though.
Perhaps it is. I mean, yes, perhaps it is. I think there's some things that perhaps get lost in terminology. When we say DevOps, what we're just drawing a distinction between is those who have a role and a skill set in the creation of something new, and those that have a role and a skill set in the maintenance and support and reliability of what's existing. And some organizations blur those boundaries easily and often, and some organizations have small teams, and people do wear 2 hats in that situation. but they might do so in an unstructured way because it's, it's inside their head, so they can juggle it themselves. Larger organizations often, and historically, and DevOps came out of the fact that, as a rule, many organizations do delineate between creation and delivery. And that came out of the fact that creation normally happens in the project bubble, right? The Scrum environment, which is separate from the business as usual. And so DevOps is a way of saying, yeah, let's not go there. Let's not do that. But we're recognizing the fact that that's where things start conceptually, and we have to bring them together. But organizations that have already broken through those and they have a separate DevOps team that's half-half, well, you still want to break down those barriers. If you've got a DevOps team where within that you've got operational expertise, but they're not necessarily the people that are actually got the KPIs to maintain the service level agreements, that's someone else. Well, they better be in pretty clever contact. Otherwise, your ops portion of your DevOps team might be compromised or struggle.
Mm-hmm. How does the PO decide what items in the backlog go into the next sprint? I assume it's not just FIFO, but a cost versus benefit exercise required on each item in the backlog, and how much effort or how many sprints are required?
Yeah, you absolutely have the prioritization on a basis of cost benefit. It absolutely exists. When you have an existing working thing, typically you have a lot smaller product backlog. When you're building it from the beginning, your backlog is enormous. It's everything. And you whittle it down to, hopefully, a handful of leftover features and functions that you need to add. And in theory, what you're then adding to it is a handful of things on an ongoing basis. It shouldn't end up being 100 things unless you're saying, we're going to add this entire new capability with 100 user stories in it. And no, we're not going to scrum that. We're just going to funnel that into the value stream and let it trickle its way into the product over the next 6 months. Yes, you can do that. Of course you can. And you're just going to have a deeper control of release planning. You're going to have a role of product owner that is going to have a lot more work to do than if they were dealing with only half a dozen requests a week, perhaps. So it's a matter of scale of where you're at with the project. But you certainly do have to make decisions, and they're usually made from the point of view of customer value, because it's the customers who are going to be saying, this is what matters to me. But it is certainly a costing. Well, if you want those, you can't have all of them at once, right? We've got to break things down into something smaller. So I can give you one big thing and 3 small things. You had these sorts of negotiations.
Going back to contiguous, one action in the delivery process or in the delivered product?
One action in the inquiry process. So what I mean by that is that if I'm not sure of something, how do I find out? I should be able to find that out with one action on my part. So I should fairly quickly be able to know, or should I already know, who or where I'm going to reach with a high degree of likelihood to get that knowledge that I need. Who am I going to call? What am I going to read? Where am I going to look? Where is that configuration recorded? I should be able to get access to that information, that answer, the minutes of that meeting where it was decided, that person's ticketing queue, that customer's payment history, whatever I need, one action for me to get that knowledge. That's what I mean by one action away.
Let me just have a look. Is it possible to apply Agile to consulting projects? I assume the answer is probably yes, but especially when it comes to estimating project time and cost. How do we estimate if we can't define or know everything up front?
So you go back to the vision, and I absolutely think that they can and do get used in consultation. But the question then comes down to what we talked about at the beginning, release planning and value, right? Because a customer is going to pay consultation. They're not going to pay for the chats that we have. They're going to pay for the answers, conclusions, and suggestions that are given at the end. That's the bones that they're going to be interested in, and that's what they're going to pay for. And so we have to have a way of defining that from a vision, from even a product document, perspective to say, well, what do you want out of this consultation process? Well, we want to learn what's wrong, or we want to learn what's good, or we want to learn how to do better, or we want to learn something and get some answers. Well, okay, we can agile our way to get there, but it has to be very clear what we're all aiming for, because it's very easy in consultations to find things that go down a rabbit warren. And part of the consultation, part of the review process that you have on a cyclic basis is the double check of the product backlog of, okay, we're exploring this and we're meeting with these 6 people from this team, and we're going to discuss these sorts of things because we think it'll yield answers in this direction. Customer, are you interested in that? And the customer should have the chance to say, yeah, look, no, I'm not concerned about those things. Don't spend time going down that. Let's go in this direction. That sort of thing has to be part of the review process. Then it can work. Talk about the release plan every review. Sorry, Shane.
Yep. I was just going to go into the next question. Is there a budget to start with, or is it continuously changed and updated?
In consultations, or is that a different question?
I think that's a different question, just in general.
So usually there is an ongoing budget. So it's usually an OPEX, not a CAPEX, when you're talking about value streams. It's usually a case of saying, well, we have this amount of resources and this amount of budget, and it's going to fund this number of people doing these sorts of things, and it's going to fund the interruption to the workflow of other people, like users, who have to talk to other people about what's working and what's not, and support people that can't just grab the next ticket because they need to answer some questions from a developer that they've just been given. Right? That's interruption to workflow efficiency and delivery. There's a cost to all of that. And that usually means there's an operational expenditure that gets tracked over time. And that's usually how it runs. And it keeps getting funded as long as it keeps delivering value. And that's obviously a question that occasionally gets answered and things get stopped or scaled back or something.
I've been asked for a comment on Agile for IT infrastructure operations teams. And by the way, we'll be closing questions in about a minute or two.
So there's going to be a bit we'll talk about with infrastructure next week, because we're going to talk about hybrid scenarios. And often infrastructure comes up as a hybrid thing, because usually infrastructure has to exist first. You have to have the hard before you put the soft on it. And so there's a different approach a lot of the time with the decisions that get made about hardware. You can't, I mean, in a cloud environment, yeah, you can agile your way through infrastructure as a service. But if you're talking about physical stuff, you can't. And there's lead times and all sorts of things. So there is a different approach. And I think that you have to find a hybrid method for most infrastructure environments. But that doesn't mean that you can't use some of the things that we talked about in week 1, which is where you're talking about tight feedback cycles, you're talking about incremental decision-making, you're talking about collaboration. A lot of those things still work very well. But we'll give you more on that next week.
Great. We've only got 3 questions left, so we'll close 4 questions. I'll close them off now. Is it good for large projects if the components are broken into manageable deliverables?
Yes, absolutely. And when we say manageable deliverables, I'm going to assume that the answer to that is capability, which is the strategic definition of features and functions, because features and functions are often defined by user stories. And you put a bunch of them together and they'll do a strategic piece of capability. And so, yes, things that have lots and lots of capability, they're going to get broken up in terms of capability, and they're going to be put into release plans. And you're going to break things down more and more. And we'll also talk a little bit about that in the reverse next week, because we're going to talk about large scale Agile. We're going to talk about Scrum and things like it what if you've got 50 people, not just 5? And it's the same idea, but in reverse. It's how do you bring things up that you can bring them back down again and still make it all work together. But yes, absolutely, you do that. You break it up and you start with the biggest, largest chunk of the vision and work that backwards from that. But we'll go more into that next week.
Right. Does it differ between projects program delivery for the duration of time and effort after go live or does it depend upon budget availability mainly?
In my experience, budget has been the biggest thing, because once you get to a point where a product or a service has ticked most of its boxes, it's live enough to be called live, it's being used, it's generating value, it's generating results. Then it's a case of, well, what's the icing? And there's usually a point at which you get diminishing returns. You start to get point where improvements are for the sake of keeping the team going and keeping the value stream going, and they start to lose their value and lose their shine. And it's nearly always, in my experience, a value and therefore a budget question. We're investing in this ongoing improvement for this thing. You haven't, yes, you've improved stuff, but you haven't added as much value out of it, and that becomes a budget question. It's rare or less often that I see it about functionality, capability, and saying, well, we want to add this, this, and this. That's usually as a holdover from an unfinished project phase, which can also happen too.
Mm-hmm. The biggest issue that this person's seeing is that they have a DevOps team who are trying to work to Agile to both develop and sustain a product. However, the organization does not work like this, and it causes lots of issues in terms of politics, people making staking territory, etc. Is this a common issue when some of the organization is using CI/CD and the organization not, such as the ITIL questions earlier?
Extremely common. When I say common, it nearly always happens. I don't think any organization that would say that they now do that well could honestly tell you that they didn't have those problems, because I think it always happens. And those organizations that I'm aware of that have gone through it, come out the other side and got good results, are the ones that have had the highest level of leadership support for the reasons behind adopting Agile delivery. And when a leader, someone from the C-suite, can articulate the benefits of DevOps, they don't have to be a champion of it or an evangelist. But when they can articulate to the rest of the C-suite and say, this is the benefit to our organization, and this is how it supports us achieving our strategy, to have these functions handled in this way. And that's going to help our share price. That's going to help our profits. That's going to help our bonuses. And this is what it's going to expect of you in terms of how it's going to need us to interact with it. When leadership can do that, it'll succeed. Until leadership can do that or wants to do that, then the work needs to be done on them to help them understand the difference, to help them understand that a more pure, complete, effective, tailored approach to all these ideas and what it really means and how to keep everyone else, firstly informed, secondly, get their buy-in, and then thirdly, keep them in line with these ideas. And it's absolutely in leadership's interest to do that, then top management will get behind it. So if you don't have their support, that's probably the biggest priority for you right now, to educate them as much as you possibly can and get them to understand that they shouldn't be tolerating the infighting, because they're the ones that are going to suffer, because everyone else can just get another job.
Absolutely.
They can't just get another company. Sorry.
Well, they can, I suppose.
Shareholders, yeah, I suppose you can, but it's usually not that easy when it's a private company.
It's work for Branson.
Tell the board what's going on and tell them how their stake is at stake.
Yes. I've left the smallest questions till last. How do we improve the Agile model for better development?
AI is going to improve that. It's a tongue-in-cheek answer, but look, the reason why Agile is hard to do is because it's asking human beings to do things that humans aren't good at. It's asking us to do things that we're subconsciously opposed to. It's asking us to do things that are uncomfortable, that are perceived as high risk for us. And the way in which a lot of AI systems now are able to manage information and provide it to us to keep us informed is going to make a lot of people a lot more comfortable with playing closer to the edge. Skating closer to the edge is going to be a lot more comfortable over the next several years, over the next decade. And I think that's where Agile is going to be improved. I'm not sure that there's going to be big changes in methodology, although I'm certain there will be some, because we'll be able to lean even further into the fact that you won't necessarily need to have a support technician that has to reach anywhere to say, who's working on this, who's working on that, who's working on something else. There'll be an AI that's already read their ticket and is telling them, you should talk to this person because they did something on this 3 months ago. And so-and-so sent such and such an email about enhancing that feature. You should have that conversation. AI is going to be doing that for us in organizations in a number of years and becoming more widely spread. You think about what that's going to do to agility. It's going to make a big difference. So strap yourselves in for that.
Absolutely. So it's probably time to share the results of the final poll.
Let's share the results of the poll. What's the big winner? 35%. We make some effort, but often fall short. So there's a large number, a third of people who've answered this question that are struggling. You know, they're behind the average. And 16% really got nowhere with it. So if you're struggling and you're worried about it, you can look at the fact that nearly three-quarters, almost three-quarters,
more than two-thirds, more than two-thirds
are saying that it's not so good. It's not so easy. It really is hard. And a very small number of people that say that they excel at this. It's tough. It really is tough. And that's why getting this right is so difficult.
And so important.
So a quick reminder before we wrap up, and Shane will give you the admin things to talk about. We're going to talk about hybrid, agile versus this and that. We're going to talk about blended agility, and we're going to talk about how that works on a larger scale strategic. We will talk about scaled agile, so the big stuff, etc., and how all that hangs together. So if anyone's interested in that, stay tuned, hang in there, and we'll of course have the same format and lots more Q&A next week as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Brenton. And I suppose in closing, there's a few things to mention. The first is don't forget to go to the forums and have a look what's been there. I'm hoping that a lot of the questions from last week that we couldn't get to got answered in the forum conversations this week. And this week we did get to all the questions, but they were really good questions. Thank you very much, everybody who participated in that. I'd also like to remind everybody, I suppose, that we do these short courses as part of delivering our master's and graduate certificate programs. And often the content, like this week's content, are actually smaller parts of larger courses that we offer. And that gives you a bit of a taste because we deliver them in the same way. In fact, Brenton teaches quite a few of our subjects at IT Masters. And so if you like what we do, feel free to have a look at our eligibility area where we'll tell you whether you can get into a postgraduate course, because most of our students actually get in on the basis of past work in life experience rather than just having done previous degrees, for example. So there's things like that that we would encourage you to have a look at, and that is why we deliver these courses, so that people who are considering study get a good chance to practice and see what it's really like before they go in, because many of you haven't done any previous study or haven't done any for many years. And so it's great to get a bit of a low stakes test, if you like. Try before you buy, as they say. Other than that, remember that the survey comes out this week as well. And also remember that if you wish to complete the course and do the final exam, you have to do each week's quiz, which is 5 multiple choice questions before you do the final one after next week. The exam will be released after the end of next week. And so
you get credits for these courses, don't you, Shane? Is that right? You
do indeed. In fact, you get, if you do 3 of these courses, you get the credit for 1 subject that you can do against any of the IT Masters half of the subjects, not the Charles Sturt ones, the IT Masters ones. And so that does give you an added extra incentive, because that's worth about $4,500 or so. Sorry, maybe not that much, just under $4,000 at the moment, and it will be going up next year as well. So it is a very high value opportunity. There are other ways of doing that as well, and I'd encourage you to look at some of the things in our credit section, particularly if you've done some of the industry subjects and credits like CISP or CompTIA subjects, etc. A lot of those actually are eligible also for credit within our courses.
And all our
Anyway,
stuff's delivered online, right?
Yeah, everything's online, 100%
All online, so it doesn't matter where
easy
you
to
are.
No, exactly. That's the end of the paid electoral announcement, as we like to call it. But also, I want to thank Lil for being there with all the answers to all of the process stuff this week and moderation. A big thank you to Brenton again. And I'll leave you for this week. And in fact, Chantel, I think, will be moderating next week. So you get a bit of a different voice. And welcome back and see you in a week.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Lily, for all the wonderful support. Thank you to everyone for all of your questions and the participation in the chat. It's been great to have you all. We have one more week to go. We're saving some of the best for last. Do come back and join us then. Until then, that's all from me for now. Thank you and good night.
Good night.